Eleanor. Ellie Thompson gripped the steering wheel of her Jeep, her knuckles white as the vehicle skidded on a slick trail. The wind howled through Yellowstone's Lamar Valley, carrying the bitter chill of an autumn dawn. A distress call crackled through her radio. A hiker, lost in the pre-dawn fog, had stumbled near a grizzly's territory. Ellie's heart pounded. She was the closest ranger, and the fog was thickening, swallowing the Teton peaks in a grey shroud. Her breath fogged the windshield as she peered into the mist, every rustle in the sagebrush spiking her fear. Was the grizzly near? Would she reach the hiker in time? The omniscient narrator knew. Something else watched from the shadows, its golden eyes glinting. Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. The radio fell silent as Ellie eased the Jeep to a stop, the hiker's coordinates pinned to a ridge a half-mile away. At 67, Ellie was no stranger to Yellowstone's dangers, but the weight of her years pressed heavier lately. The omniscient narrator peered into her mind. She feared her strength was fading, that the park she'd devoted her life to might outlive her purpose. A widow since her husband's hunting accident a decade ago, Ellie had buried her grief in her work, protecting the wild creatures that roamed these lands. Yet, alone in the fog, doubt gnawed. Could she still make a difference? She stepped from the Jeep, her boots crunching on frost-kissed grass. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, sharp against her lungs. Her medical kit, water bottle, and radio were clipped to her belt, a ritual of readiness honed over years. The narrator saw her resolve, a flicker of the young ranger who'd once dreamed of saving every living thing. But another thought lingered. What if she was too old for this now? As Ellie trekked toward the ridge, the fog parted briefly, revealing Yellowstone's vast beauty, golden meadows stretching toward snow-dusted peaks, the Lamar River a silver thread in the distance. She scanned for the hiker, her eyes catching a glint of red fabric snagged on a bush. Relief surged, but it vanished when she spotted bloodstains on the grass, dark and fresh. Her pulse quickened, the narrator unveiling her fear, not a grizzly, but something wounded, vulnerable. She followed the trail, her breath visible in the chill, until she reached a tangle of rusted barbed wire, remnants of an old ranch fence. There, ensnared, lay a mountain lion, its silver-grey fur matted with blood. The beast's flanks heaved, its golden eyes dim with pain. The wire bit deep into its shoulder and back, each movement tightening its grip. The narrator dipped into the lion's mind. Exhaustion dulled its instincts, but a faint spark of trust flickered as it sensed Ellie's approach. Ellie froze, her heart a drumbeat. She'd faced wolves, bears, but this lion, majestic even in agony, stirred something deeper, a call to act despite the risk. She knelt, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. "Easy now," she whispered, naming the lion Sage for its wise, piercing gaze. The narrator saw Sage's faint response, a softening in his eyes, as if he understood her intent. Ellie pulled pliers from her kit, her fingers brushing the cold steel. Sweat beaded on her brow as she cut the wire, each snap echoing like a gunshot in the quiet dawn. The wind carried the scent of blood and sagebrush, and Ellie's voice, soft and soothing, wove through the lion's pain. "You're gonna be okay, Sage." The final wire fell, and Ellie applied antiseptic, her hands swift but gentle. Sage shuddered, his breath ragged. She bandaged the wounds, her touch a lifeline. When she stepped back, Sage struggled to his feet, swaying but alive. His eyes locked onto hers, a silent vow etched in their depths. The narrator knew. This moment bound them, human and beast, in a way neither could yet fathom. Sage limped into the pines, vanishing as the fog closed in. Ellie exhaled, her body trembling with relief and awe. The hiker's call still waited, but this encounter had shifted something within her. The narrator revealed her thoughts. Saving Sage felt like reclaiming a piece of herself, a spark of purpose she'd feared was lost. As she radioed for backup, Margaret's voice crackled through, her retired teacher tone laced with worry. "Ellie, you're not 20 anymore. Be careful out there." Ellie smiled faintly, but the narrator saw her resolve harden. She wasn't done yet. As she headed toward the ridge, a ranger's report buzzed in. Illegal traps had been spotted near the park's border. The narrator hinted at a lurking danger: poachers, their eyes on Yellowstone's wildlife, and perhaps on Ellie herself. She drove into the mist, unaware that Sage's gaze followed from the shadows, his paw prints a silent promise of what lay ahead. The autumn sun hung low over Yellowstone, casting long shadows across the sagebrush plains. Eleanor Ellie Thompson maneuvered her jeep along a rutted trail, the engine's hum blending with the distant bugle of an elk. Weeks had passed since she freed the mountain lion she'd named Sage, but his piercing golden eyes haunted her thoughts. The omniscient narrator peered into her mind. Ellie wondered if Sage had survived, if her act of courage mattered in the vastness of this wild land. At 67, she felt the weight of time, her body slower, her purpose shakier. The park had been her refuge since her husband's death, but lately she questioned whether she still belonged here. Ellie adjusted her ranger hat, its brim worn from years of sun and wind. Her radio crackled with routine chatter, but her focus drifted to the horizon, where the Absaroka Range glowed amber. The narrator saw her heart, a tangle of pride and doubt, her love for Yellowstone warring with the fear that her best days were gone. She checked her gear, medical kit, water, binoculars, a habit that grounded her. As she drove, the memory of Sage's trembling form, freed from barbed wire, sparked a flicker of hope. Had she made a difference? Near a cottonwood grove, Ellie stopped to scan for pronghorn, their white rumps flashing in the distance. The air carried the sharp tang of sage and earth, a scent as familiar as her own breath. Then a rustle in the brush made her freeze. From a rocky outcrop, Sage emerged, his silver-grey fur catching the sunlight. He stood still, his eyes locked on hers, no threat in his posture. The narrator delved into Sage's mind. He recognized Ellie, his savior, and some primal instinct urged him to stay near, to repay her kindness. Ellie's breath caught, fear mingling with awe. A mountain lion shadowing her was dangerous, yet his calm presence felt like a gift. She spoke softly. "You're still here, Sage." His ears twitched, as if her voice anchored him. The narrator saw their connection deepen, a fragile thread spun from that dawn rescue. Ellie climbed back into the jeep, her hands trembling. Sage didn't follow immediately, but as she drove, she glimpsed him paralleling her path, a shadow weaving through the sagebrush. The narrator knew Sage's loyalty was no accident, but a choice born of gratitude. At the ranger station, Ellie confided in Tom, a young ranger with a Wyoming drawl and a skeptic's squint. "A lion's trailing me, Tom, the one I saved." Tom leaned back, his boots scuffing the floor. "Ellie, that's trouble. Mountain lions don't make friends." The narrator revealed Tom's concern, rooted in stories of rogue animals, but also his respect for Ellie's grit. Ellie shrugged, unwilling to betray Sage. "He's not hurting anyone?" Tom shook his head, but the narrator saw his doubt soften. Ellie's passion was hard to dismiss. Margaret, the retired schoolteacher who volunteered at the park, caught Ellie later, her grey braid swinging as she hauled a crate of trail maps. "You're pushing yourself too hard, Ellie." That lion business sounds reckless. The narrator unveiled Margaret's worry. She'd seen Ellie spiral after her husband's death and feared losing her friend to the wild. Ellie smiled faintly. Maybe reckless is what keeps me going. Margaret's eyes softened, but she pressed, Your husband always said you were born to save what's wild. Don't let it consume you. The narrator shifted to a darker thread. Poachers. Rangers had found a poisoned deer carcass near the park's border, and Ellie's discovery of a threatening note, "Stay out of the backcountry, Ranger," still chilled her. She hadn't told Tom or Margaret, fearing they'd pull her from patrols. The narrator knew the poachers were closing in, their greed targeting Yellowstone's wildlife, and Ellie's interference made her a mark. That evening, while checking pronghorn tracks by a stream, Ellie spotted Sage again, closer now, lounging on a boulder. Their eyes met, a silent pact. The narrator saw Sage's resolve. He'd guard her, as she'd guarded him. As Ellie traced the stream, her boot caught on something sharp, a hidden poacher's trap, its steel jaws gleaming. Her heart raced. Sage could have stepped into it. She disabled the trap, her hands steady but her mind reeling. The narrator revealed her fear. The poachers weren't just a threat to the park, but to her and Sage. She buried the trap's remains, vowing to protect him. Sage watched from the brush, his presence a quiet strength. The narrator hinted at what lay ahead. Sage's loyalty would soon face a greater test. Driving back, Ellie glanced at the sunset, the sky ablaze with crimson. The note's warning echoed, but Sage's shadow in her rearview mirror steadied her. The narrator knew. Their bond, forged in blood and wire, was about to change everything. The storm came without warning, a beast of wind and rain that churned Yellowstone into chaos. Ellie's radio buzzed with urgency. Campers at Pelican Creek needed evacuation, the swollen creek threatening to flood their site. Worse, a herd of bison spooked by the tempest had turned aggressive, their massive forms looming in the deluge. The omniscient narrator captured the scene. Rain lashed the meadows, campers huddled in sodden tents, and Ellie's jeep bounced through mud, her face grim. She knew the risks. Bison could charge without warning, and at her age, a misstep could be fatal. The narrator delved into Ellie's mind. Fear battled duty, but Sage's image steadied her. She'd saved him. Now she'd save these strangers. The campers' panic was palpable, their voices shrill as Ellie shouted directions, her ranger's authority cutting through the storm. Tom's voice crackled over the radio. "Ellie, bison are closing in! Get out now!" The narrator saw Tom's dread, his hands gripping the wheel of a second jeep, miles away. Margaret, monitoring from the station, prayed silently, her faith in Ellie unshaken, but her heart tight. Ellie herded the campers toward higher ground, their flashlights bobbing in the dark. The ground shook with the bison's approach, their snorts drowned by thunder. In the chaos, Ellie slipped, her knee twisting as she fell behind. The narrator unveiled her terror. She was alone, stranded on a muddy knoll, the herd's hooves a deafening drum. Her radio was dead, swallowed by the flood. She scrambled to her feet, pain shooting through her leg, and faced the charging bison, their eyes wild in the lightning's flash. The narrator saw her despair. She was too old, too slow, her life slipping away in the mud. Then, a roar cleaved the storm. Sage leapt from the darkness, his silver fur slick with rain, his fangs bared. The narrator plunged into his mind. Loyalty drove him, a primal need to protect the woman who'd freed him. Sage positioned himself between Ellie and the herd, his roars a challenge that echoed off the hills. The bison slowed, their charge faltering as Sage darted forward, his movements a blur of courage. The narrator captured Ellie's awe, her heart pounding with gratitude and fear. Sage dodged a swinging horn, his claws digging into the mud, buying Ellie precious seconds. She limped toward a rocky ridge, her breath ragged. The narrator saw her resolve reignite. Sage's sacrifice was her lifeline. Sage held his ground, fainting and snarling, his strength waning under the herd's weight. The bison, confused and exhausted, began to veer, their hooves churning a new path. Sage collapsed, his flanks heaving as the last beast vanished into the rain. Ellie stumbled to his side, her hands stroking his soaked fur, tears mixing with the downpour. "You brave fool," she whispered, her voice breaking. The narrator revealed her epiphany. Sage had given her not just survival, but a reason to fight on. Ellie fumbled for her spare radio, its signal weak but alive. "Tom, I'm at the ridge. Bring the vet truck, now!" The narrator saw Tom's relief, his jeep already speeding through the storm. Margaret's voice joined, steady but choked. "We're coming, Ellie." They found her cradling Sage, his eyes half open, his breath shallow. The narrator unveiled Sage's fading thoughts. He'd protected her, as she'd protected him, their bond sealed in this moment. Tom and Ellie lifted Sage into the truck, the vet station their only hope. As they drove, the narrator revealed a chilling clue. Tom spotted a rifle scope glinting in the mud, dropped by someone watching the chaos. The poachers had been there, their eyes on Ellie. The narrator knew. This wasn't over. Ellie held Sage's paw, her heart heavy with gratitude and dread. The storm raged on, but in that truck a fragile miracle held fast. A woman and a lion, bound by courage, facing an uncertain dawn. The storm had passed, leaving Yellowstone bathed in a tender light, the meadows glistening as if polished by the rain. Eleanor Ellie Thompson sat by a cot in the park's vet station, her weathered hands folded, her eyes fixed on Sage. The mountain lion's silver-grey fur rose and fell with shallow breaths, his wounds bandaged but his strength returning. The omniscient narrator delved into Ellie's heart. Gratitude mingled with fear, the memory of Sage's roar against the bison herd still vivid. At 67, she'd faced death and found purpose in this wild creature's loyalty. The narrator saw Sage's own quiet resolve, his golden eyes softening whenever Ellie's voice filled the room. She read aloud from a worn copy of Emily Dickinson, her voice a soothing cadence. "Hope is the thing with feathers," she murmured, the words a bridge between them. The narrator peered into Sage's mind. Though wild, he felt her care, their bond a tether stronger than instinct. Ellie's visits were daily now, each one a ritual of healing. The vet, a gruff Wyoming native, marveled at Sage's recovery. "Never seen a lion trust like that," he said. Ellie smiled, but the narrator knew her thoughts. Sage wasn't just a lion, he was her mirror, reflecting her own fight to endure. Word of Ellie and her lion spread through Yellowstone, rippling into Wyoming's small towns. Local reporters camped at the park's gates, and tourists whispered of the ranger who'd tamed a mountain lion. Ellie shunned the attention, her focus on Sage. The narrator revealed her unease. Fame could draw the wrong eyes, like those of the poachers still lurking. Tom, the young ranger, and Margaret, the volunteer, became her shield, deflecting reporters with Wyoming's blunt courtesy. The narrator saw their loyalty, Tom's brash protectiveness, Margaret's quiet faith, binding them to Ellie like family. The poaching threat loomed, its shadow darker since Tom found the rifle scope in the storm's aftermath. Ellie, Tom, and Margaret met with park police, their faces grim as they pored over evidence. The scope's serial number traced to a local outfitter, a front for illegal hunts. The narrator unveiled Ellie's resolve. She'd protect Sage, even if it meant facing the men who'd threatened her. With police, they set a trap, staking out a remote trail where poachers had struck before. The sting was swift. 3 men, their rifles loaded, were caught mid-hunt. One confessed they'd targeted Ellie for disabling their traps, her note a warning they'd meant to enforce. The narrator saw Ellie's relief, but also her pride. She'd guarded her park, her home. Sage's release was set for a crisp evening, the sky a tapestry of stars over Yellowstone's rolling hills. Ellie stood on a ridge, her ranger jacket zipped against the chill as rangers and vets prepared Sage. The narrator captured her heart's ache. Letting him go felt like losing a piece of herself, yet keeping him would betray his nature. Sage stepped from the crate, his movements fluid, his eyes scanning the wild. He paused, turning to Ellie, their gazes locking in a moment the narrator etched deep. A farewell, but also a vow. Sage's mind held her image, a human who'd reshaped his world. He bounded into the sagebrush, his silver form fading under the Milky Way. Ellie lingered, tears tracing her cheeks. Margaret joined her, her hand warm on Ellie's shoulder. "You gave him his life back," she said. Tom, nearby, grinned. "And he gave you yours." The narrator saw Ellie's transformation. Through Sage, she'd found not just purpose, but a defiance of age, a reason to embrace her years. A crow ranger, his voice soft, shared a tribal legend of animals repaying human kindness, framing their story as timeless. The narrator wove this into Ellie's thoughts, grounding her in Wyoming's ancient soul. Days later, Ellie patrolled alone, her jeep rumbling through dawn's first light. The Lamar Valley stretched before her, its grasses swaying, whispering of Sage. The narrator knew he was near, his paw prints hidden, but his presence a quiet guard. Ellie's heart was lighter now, her doubts of irrelevance fading. Margaret and Tom, her chosen kin, filled her evenings with laughter, their bond forged in the storm's crucible. The narrator saw her legacy, a woman who'd saved a lion and, in turn, herself. As the sun rose, painting the Tetons gold, Ellie glanced at the horizon. A faint rustle in the grass stirred her, and though she saw nothing, she smiled. The narrator revealed the truth. Sage watched from a distant ridge, his eyes steady, their bond unbroken. Ellie drove on, her path clear, carrying a truth for all who'd hear her story. Kindness, however small, could forge miracles in the wild. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.